Yes, people. What's going on? It's Egal Talks Football. Let me just change this a little bit. There you go. It's Egal Talks Football. We're back again with another video. Today, I got special guest with us, Tom Canton. If you guys don't know Tom from the Gooner Talk, and of course, one of the main writers right now for Football London covering Arsenal. Honestly, man, you're living the dream. First, before you were working, doing this part-time, now you're doing this full-time. Talk to me. How's the transition been, man? Because it must be crazy going from working, doing content part-time to now doing it full-time and also working in journalism.
Yeah, crazy. I think this summer will be 3 years that I've been at FL. Since I moved in 21, I quit teaching back in 2020 and took that leap of faith, and it's worked out. You know, I've done the channel since 2016, so that's always been going a long time alongside work. So it's never really felt like part-time channel because it always feels like you're constantly doing something. But yeah, it's been mad. It's a wonderful, very lucky situation to be in. So very happy, and thanks for having me on the show.
No worries. Do you get to celebrate the goals as much as the fans, or you got to keep it professional in the box?
I don't. I sometimes do, but yeah, in the press box, it's like an unwritten rule that you're not meant to celebrate. But I mean, when Nelson scored against Bournemouth last season, and Bryce against Man United this season, goals like that, you can't help but celebrate.
No, I hear it. And yeah, man, you know what? I haven't had you on the show in a while, so it's nice to have you back on. And Thanks, you know what? Since we last spoke, a lot has changed. I think last time we spoke was before we started doing title challenges. Like I think this was back when we were talking about Edu out days.
Boy, yeah, I think you came on one of my phone-ins talking about Edu a long time ago. Yeah,
yeah, boy, how things have changed, man. I'll say this: you probably didn't think we were going to be this good this quickly. Be honest.
I was surprised when we competed for the title in 22-3. That was definitely a surprise. So if you'd have said then, do I think we'd be competing for titles? I didn't know. If you'd have said by 23, 24, maybe, because the progression was there. The evidence was always there that we were going in this direction. So, I never really quite got how people couldn't see the pathway. I get that there was like low points and doubts and stuff, but we were always heading in a really positive direction. So, some people still try to cling on to it now, but the majority, I think, can see without question what we're doing.
Fair enough. I think maybe we should start with, what do you think of the season? What did you rate the season out of 10, if you were to rate it out of 10?
7.5 to 8 out of 10. And that's me being quite scrutinizing because, ultimately we didn't end up with any pieces of silverware, which is something that this team frankly deserves to get. So if you don't win anything, I think that has to come into your thinking. We moved forwards, that's why I think maybe you lean towards the 8 out of 10 for the season, because to finish just 2 points off Manchester City shows you the progression from the previous season where we obviously faded away much sooner than we managed to go all the way to the final game this season, So yeah, it was more of a 7.5 to 8 out of 10. I lean probably slightly towards the 8 and look ahead to what is to come next season, which is really exciting.
Fair enough. Let's get started with the Mikel Arteta chatter. It's kind of slowed down. We don't have to hear all the people saying Arteta out anymore. I think more people are believing in the manager. More people are believing in the process of the situation that we find ourselves in. And I think everyone kind of realized, you look around, you see what's happening with Chelsea, Manchester United, the level of manager they're looking at. In addition to, if I'm not mistaken, Bayern Munich signed Vincent Kompany as their manager. So I think Mikel Arteta is like one of the prize young managers out there. And I think Arsenal fans finally starting to realize why the club has been backing him so much. And you recently did an article, if I'm not mistaken, on Arteta getting a new deal. So talk to me. What do you think about the new deal potentially coming? And are you surprised that the club is going to be holding on to one of their main men?
Of course not. No, I think that there is an expectation that the job that he's done has been very good, re-establishing Arsenal amongst the elite sides, not just in England, but of course in European competition as well. Arsenal will go in to the Champions League next season as one of the favourites, and certainly within the top 4 or 5 clubs for that competition into next season. And that's a credit to where Arsenal have, elevated themselves to in the past few years. It needs to be converted into trophies. We all know that. And I think there's the majority would certainly have confidence that is on its way and that will be coming, but that still needs to be delivered. I think that on Arteta in particular, you pointed out Vincent Kompany and Bayern Munich. If any club replacing their coach wishes they could employ Mikel Arteta right now, as the guy to take them forwards. Man City, when eventually they lose Guardiola, I wouldn't be shocked to see them, potentially courting Arteta as a successor because of the job that he's done at Arsenal. To take Arsenal from where they were, which was, people forget, 11th back in 2019, to where they are now, and to completely overhaul the squads, and go toe to toe with City is no easy feat. And now, obviously, the job this summer will be renewing him to a new deal. But that next deal comes with a proviso for me. I think when you renew that contract, which I would expect to be a 3-year up until 2027, that's not any specific information. It's just that would be my estimation of what I would expect the deal to run through until. That deal comes with the proviso that he has to deliver a Premier League or a Champions League title, because if he doesn't do that in the next 3 years, after this investment, after the progression, what we find out is that this is maybe as far as he can take Arsenal. And then you need to look at how you go beyond that. Now, depending upon the options of managers that are out there, if indeed, and I hope that it doesn't, because I hope that we get that success as soon as feasibly possible, it would be interesting to see what the landscape is like, around that time. But the club are, completely bowled over by Arteta and very, very keen and happy to continue with him.
I kind of compared it to digging for diamonds and giving up before you get to the wall, and you're literally about to break through the wall. That's how I view certain people who want to get rid of the manager right now. Just because I get it, we didn't win the league this year, we didn't win the league last year, but I'm not putting it down to the manager's shortcomings. I'm more or less saying, you know what, we're on the cusp of greatness, and I can see that greatness is just. We just need to get over it. I fully agree with you there. And Arteta is going to be given a new deal. And even if he is given a new deal, if things do go south, you can always still end up going in a different direction. It doesn't change anything. But people, do me a favor, be nice to the guest, and also please do like the video if you guys haven't already done so. Right? And yeah, Tom, I'm used to. You're probably used to all the people who are always like, we're Arteta sexuals and all this stupidness that we hear every single day on social media. It's crazy. If you go to the ground,
I never get to hear it.
You blocked it out. You probably have 150 people blocked by now, don't you?
I have a very trigger happy block button. It makes my life a lot easier, But to be fair, like the amount of phone-in shows that I have where you give the opportunity to people to come on and challenge your point of view, but if it takes away their ability to hide behind the keyboard, they often don't do that. So, it's a very safe world out here.
There you go. And before we go on to anything else, do me a favor, guys, hit that like button. If you have a question, put the letter Q and write the question out, and we'll try to get to it. But before we go any further, I just wanted to go to your article that you wrote on Edu. Now, if I'm not mistaken, you were basically trying to debunk the myth that Arsenal are bad at selling players, and we need to improve, obviously, because we still haven't sold players to the same level as Chelsea and Manchester United and other clubs. But you believe that it's a myth that Edu has a bad record at selling players?
I think it's not a myth that we're bad at selling. It's a myth that we're as bad as what some people think we are. Some people think that Arsenal are terrible sellers when it comes to making money in the market. The reality is that was the case, but Arsenal have significantly improved their sales reputation in the last couple of seasons. I think what people don't necessarily take into account, of course,
Can you give me some examples?
Yeah, of course. I think when you look at Folarin Balogun, who made a handful of senior appearances for Arsenal, we sent him on loan, did well at Monaco, but I never really saw him being of a level that meant that he was going to break into the Arsenal first team. So to get upwards of £30 million with a 17.5% sell-on clause in that deal, which, if he was to have done well, because a win-win really, if he did well at Monaco and moved on and got another like 40-50 million pound transfer, Arsenal would be making, just under 20% of that, as a sell-on. If he didn't do well, which I don't want to say he didn't do well this season at Monaco, but I certainly think he had a season which vindicated Arsenal's decision to get 30 million plus for him. You got Granit Xhaka, of course, who, despite the fact, has done very well at Bayer Leverkusen. to get 20 million pounds plus for him, despite the fact he only had a year left on his deal, and Arsenal bringing in Declan Rice to basically replace that left 8 position. I know that people thought it was the 6, and certainly it's turned out to be the left 8 that Rice has moved into, and the expectation is that will probably continue into the foreseeable future as well. To get upwards of 20 million pounds for Xhaka was obviously very good. Then you go back a little bit further, to the start of Arteta's tenure. Joe Willock got us 25 million pounds, when he moved to Newcastle. And despite Emi Martinez, who's a player that's gone on to do very good things at Aston Villa, after only 12 appearances, Arsenal ended up getting just close to 20 million pounds for him. I think we look at that with some regret, but at the time, it's much better than it maybe looked.
I know you've been on Dan's channel often recently also, so you probably see similar. Dan, big up Dan Potts, 12-man podcast. You probably seen the pushback that I get whenever I go on there. They talk about Lokongas, they talk about Alnenis, they talk about Cedrics.
We talk about the ones that are barely a mark on our investment sheet. Yeah. In
addition to our poor sales in the past are being basically pushed on Edu. But since Edu's come in, has he been able to actually sell any of the players, or is it that the market has not been looking at any of our players as valuable? Which one would you rather say?
I think it's a combination of the two in some ways. I think Edu has had his struggles in the market, because what Edu when Edu comes in before Arteta does, and at a time where Raul Sanyehi's of course at the club, and the dealings we did during that tenure of Sanyehi and Hasfami and Sven Mislintat, we made some incredible financial questionable decisions. And at the start of Arteta's tenure as well, we didn't make the best decisions either. You had Willian, you had Cedric, you had Pablo Mari coming in. Willian was put on a huge, amount of money, didn't deliver. And Arsenal had to make sure that when we moved forwards, we were going to overhaul the squad in a way that was still financially viable for us, but with an element of risk, because we could only bring in players that, we couldn't bring in the Declan Rices 3 years ago. If we were spending money, it was spending money as close to 50 million pounds, but not really any higher. So Ben White came in, you had Partey coming in for 45, you had Tomiyasu coming in for 20, you had Zinchenko and Jesus still beneath that 50 million pound bracket. And it wasn't, of course, until we signed Havertz and Declan Rice that Arteta finally kind of broke that 50 million pound threshold. So Edu's in a position where he's got to overhaul a squad with a lot of players that there isn't too much interest in, because we've put players on silly wages. There are players that are aging. There are players that aren't fitting into plans, like Özil, like Socrates, and simply aren't good enough. So the irony was, of course, that Arsenal and Edu were getting loads of criticism for not selling well enough, but at the same time, we're criticizing the players for not being good enough, And so where does the balance come? Do you criticize the club for not having a good enough squad, but then criticize the club for not selling well enough, despite the fact that you yourselves don't think the players that we've got to sell aren't good enough? And, unsurprisingly, we didn't have too much interest in those. But that has changed gradually, and we have overhauled the squad very smartly. And, you look at all of the investment under Arteta, which, amounts to, I think it's 590 million before add-ons, and then that adds up to about 640 to 650. It's not this 700 million figure people lie about, but when it comes to that amount of money that we've invested, if you look at how much of it is a hit as opposed to how much of it are misses, the hits far outweigh the misses of our investment.
Oh yeah, when it comes to our incomings, but people, they get upset about stuff like this. 13 million Aubameyang, they got 13 million from Chelsea, Barcelona. You got the Miguel. You got the situation right now with what's that academy kid? Omari Hutchinson went to Chelsea, and now they're going to get 20 million for him.
And we're going to get a very good chunk of that money, by the way.
Really?
Yeah.
When you say a good chunk, you mean like 20% or something like that?
I don't know the exact figure. I just know from what is being suggested that there's a sell-on clause supposedly in that.
Amazing! I didn't know that.
I need to double check it, but that's the rumor at the moment that we have.
Wow! I've
seen people say 50%. I don't know if it's as high as that, but there is suggestions that there is a.
50% is crazy, but I am impressed. If they did put a sell-in clause, that's great. But I thought the player left on a free deal.
You can still get sell-on clauses in players that leave on freeze, so it can still happen. It's rare, but it can happen.
That's amazing if that's the case. Also, the main thing that I had issues with Edu is it seemed like at the beginning of his tenure, he was just signing a lot of players with release clauses and low signings. But after getting the Declan Rice deal over the line, I think he has a lot more credit in the bank for me. But I need to see sales of Eddie Nketiah potentially for 30 million plus, maybe. Smith Rowe, we have a market for him. It looks like Lokonga, we're going to have a market for him. These guys, if we can get decent returns for these guys, I think he can definitely change his reputation. And as you said, sales reputation under Edu, it just might not be as bad as many people think. And if he does do what we think he can do this window, then we might break that 35 million pound barrier that you've been talking about.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, there are a number of players out there that I think that, Arsenal are going to be open to selling. Smith Rowe and Nketiah, Partey, of course. You've got Ramsdale, Tierney, Lokonga, Tavares, of course, as well. There could be some surprise exits. You never know what might happen with Zinchenko. You never know what might happen with Jesus. You don't know what might happen with Kivior. There are players that could leave the club and could earn us money. I'm not expecting Arsenal to spend like a Declan Rice amount of money on a player unless there is a huge amount of sales that we make, but those sales could lead to Arsenal, meaning we can go and invest something bigger.
Hey, an opportunity will have to arise that is unlike anything else. Let me ask you a quick question, because I know you might know a little bit more about transfers than I do. Obviously, I'm not asking you for ITK information. I'm just saying what's your opinion. There's a player I like, and I've been looking at him as a potential signing for Arsenal for well over 2 years now. Is there any real interest in Xavi Simons? Because it seems like we're not going in for him as much as we are some of the other targets that we're looking at. He might not be at the top of our list.
Yeah, I wish there was more that I'd heard in any links to Simmons. There was certainly interest when he was still with PSV. And before he made that switch to PSG when they had that buyback clause, he was seen, I think, at the time as potentially a very financial, a bit of I think in the same way they looked at Jorrel Hato as well prior to him signing that new contract. Arsenal sometimes look at young players and see a really good financial, benefit or gem in some of those. And Xavi Simons was seen as that when he was at PSV, but when he went back to PSG, it's a club, of course, when you get him on a long-term contract with that low buyback clause, they can ask for a huge fee. And since that, it's diminished somewhat. But interestingly, he doesn't seem to be keen on staying at PSG. He's probably going to leave on loan. If Arsenal can get him on loan with an option to buy, that would be perfect, But it doesn't seem that there's much in.
Apparently, Bayern want him, and it's like,
wouldn't be surprised, yeah.
And if he has a choice to go to Bayern, he's probably going to end up going. But you said something about Hato. I keep hearing about him. He can play a lot of positions. He's young. He might sign a new contract with his current club, and still Arsenal might be interested in him. But do you think this is a deal that gets done? If you were to put your money on it, do you think this is one of the deals that we look like could potentially be at later in the window, something that we actually try to get done?
It is difficult. His recent quotes are very committal towards Ajax. Now, that's not to say that it's impossible that Arsenal still wouldn't land someone like him. I think that it would take quite a bit of money to convince Ajax to sell. His new contract doesn't include a release clause, so they don't need to sell, for anything they don't want to. And they have managed to get huge fees for very young players like Frenkie de Jong and Matthijs de Ligt in the past, of course, as well, when another big club's come in for them. I think we did a really good deal for Yuri and Timber. 38 million pounds is not really a lot of money for a player of his caliber at his age. And yet we did a really good deal to get that through the door. When you consider how much Man United played for Lisandro Martinez, for instance, it's night and day. So it would cost a lot. And I don't think it will happen this summer, but Arsenal will certainly continue to watch and scout him.
Yeah, he has a lot of potential. This could be something down the road. It doesn't have to necessarily be right now. There are a lot of rumors about Onana today, and this is, I don't know if you got an article coming out on him or not. We got Mark, friend of the show, saying Onana is the man, Egal. I said that on Tom's phone-in show, and I really want that.
I wanted to go through is what he's saying.
Yeah. I think Onana showed his value to that Everton team and how good he is against us on the final day of the season. And if we're gonna get rid of Thomas Partey, maybe he's not a like for like, but he's Premier League proven. He's quite young. He's quite tall. He has the physicality. He can win all the duels, and underrated, I would say, in his passing ability and his finishing ability in the box for somebody who's supposed to be playing as a box to box or a deep line playmaker. Not a deep line player, but he can play deep.
Yeah.
I think his versatility is exactly what Mikel Arteta might be looking for. And I just wonder how much he would go for. haven't seen any price tags. I've just been seeing conversations.
The problem with Onana is that he cost Everton a lot of money. And so because they're under pressure to sell, they would need to sell for quite a considerable amount because they would need to show profit, and it's important for them to do that. So he would be expensive. I think they would be looking for upwards of 40, upwards of potentially 50 million to get Onana through the door. And even then, that's not a massive profit on what they paid Lille only a couple of seasons ago. So I think that Onana for me is a player I like. I just think if Arsenal are going to go for a really expensive midfielder, I think Arsenal should be looking at going for something transformative for their midfield that would complete the Rice Ødegaard question mark trio that we've been looking to complete.
Who's that for you?
I don't know if there is one out there at the moment. I like Joshua Kimmich a lot, and I think that Kimmich could come in for like a short term and be, in my opinion, world-class quality bringing into that midfield. And then what you do is you get Kimmich for a couple of years, and then you look at the market next summer or the season after that, and then you find the guy. But I'm never a fan of signing players for the sake of signing players if you think something better is around the corner. And I don't think we should. But if you can wait and bring in top quality like Kimmich would be, I think that's a smart way to go about it. But the midfield is the priority for Arsenal this summer. I reported this only an hour ago. Despite all the talk of strikers and Sesko and stuff, midfield, I'm told, is the area they're most keen on, really landing a top player. But it's not apparent who that player is at the moment.
Do you think we would be at the top of Kimmich's list? With Barcelona's connection to Bayern players.
Yeah, I think Arsenal would be a very attractive option for Kimmich. Of course, he's got a good friend in Kai Havertz there as well, and I think Arsenal would certainly be in the frame of clubs that he'd be very keen on considering as an option, along with Barcelona as well. But
would he have to be our highest paid player?
I think you'd have to make him one of, if not the highest paid player at the club if he came in. Yeah, like you're talking about a world-class player here in Kimmich, and who's won everything at the top level with Bayern Munich and is probably one of Germany's, if not alongside Kroos until he retires, their most important and most influential players. His presence off the field is massive. It's like having an extra coach on the field in Kimmich because he's that good and that much of a leader. So it's without question, he would have to be one of the highest paid, if not the highest paid, if you signed him.
So just for the record, this is not something to get aggregated. This is just an educated guess, or
what in terms of Kimmich? There's nothing regarding kind of Arsenal going for him. It's just if there was kind of not a standout candidate that Arsenal would look to move for in midfield, he'd make a very good option for the short term.
Yeah, I just wanted to make that clear in case somebody tried to flip it up. You know what I mean? But yeah, when it comes to everyone in the chat, let me know what you guys are doing. Please do hit that like button, guys. There's a lot of names in the midfield though. If I'm not mistaken, we were looking at Bruno Guimarães. Does it seem like we were priced out of a move for Bruno Guimarães potentially?
I think, at the moment we would be, because the £100 million release clause is what Newcastle rightfully would ask for. He's very keen to stay. He's not, made any pushes to leave. If that changed because a club approached, maybe it would. But he's spoken very openly about happiness to stay at Newcastle. And Newcastle, despite what some people say, aren't under, massive pressures necessarily to get £100 million sale off their books. So I think Arsenal's interest in him is obviously well documented, but unless Arsenal, as I said earlier, managed to sell considerably, it would be a surprise to see them go in and activate that release clause.
So yeah, it's not as optimistic on that one. And then I'm hearing a lot of stuff about Zubimendi, Joao Neves. Personally, to me, I don't think any of those are like saying that we're going to go in for them. It's just
Zubimendi's got very quiet, very quiet. There was definitely interest in him as far back as January of 23, but the keenness on the players' side seems to not necessarily be there to have convinced Arsenal to really push for him. So I think that one is probably off the table at this point.
And Joao Neves, are we priced out of a move for him also?
I think so, yeah. I mean, Benfica do and will ask for, the 100 million plus that it would cost. Arsenal do like him. Team News and Ticks is very well connected. Already, revealed that information first. So he is a player the club like, but again, very expensive, and I doubt they'd be able to go in for him.
There's a relatively affordable player in Monaco in Fofana, but I haven't heard too much concrete news about him. I'm not gonna lie. I've been looking out for it because I like him as a player, but 20 million they're saying he could go for, and still I don't see anybody interested in him except for Manchester United.
What you have to remember that the transfer window is something of an iceberg. What we hear and see and get spoken about, even from in the journalist point of view, you only hear about certain aspects, and a lot of that is noise. In the media world, you want to get, you obviously want to grab stories, you want to do stuff, and obviously agents are a big part of that, intermediaries are a big part of that, and so there's a lot of noise made about players to drum up interest. But in terms of kind of the club side of things, it is very quiet on not just the likes of Fofana, but on a lot of players. Arsenal's business is quite quiet in terms of what's being spoken about. But, when I spoke to a contact of mine at the club today, that the feeling is that there is a lot of confidence that Arsenal will be stronger, at the start of next season. The squad will be improved for the start of next season. So whilst it's quiet now, as it should be, yeah, you would expect that. But of course, there's been summers where that confidence hasn't been there because either they felt as though the targets aren't as obvious for them, or they weren't expecting to be able to spend as much money as they thought they'd be able to spend. But this summer, they really do have that confidence that the upgrades are going to come. But as I said, it's an iceberg, the window, and we hear so much of it, but that's only on the surface, and what's underneath and what's going on is so much bigger and so much larger and still not visible to us.
I'm seeing Julián Álvarez linked to everybody. I'm not going to lie to you, Tom. I'm not 100% sold on Álvarez. I think he's a good player for City, but if he was to come to Arsenal, would you take him as our main man?
I talked about this on my morning show today. Like, he got 32 goal contributions last season, which is a stunning amount of goal contributions. He's one of the most consistent players in terms of his appearances for City, in terms of how many appearances he makes for City. He's one of Pep Guardiola's most used players. But I don't know what it is. There's some kind of block there and kind of something about, I don't know if it's the Gabriel Jesus factor, that we've seen Jesus take that step to Arsenal. It's not necessarily been a wild success, that deal, but I think obviously that's been affected by injuries. Álvarez is a fantastic talent. It would make no sense, though, for City to sell him to Arsenal. Arsenal are City's main rivals, and whilst that wasn't the case when they sold us Jesus and Zinchenko, it surprised City how competitive Arsenal were after those two deals. I don't think it would make any sense for Arsenal to be sold Álvarez whatsoever.
Do you see them selling him to a Chelsea?
Yeah, I think that's more feasible, yeah, because I don't think they look at Chelsea realistically as a potential title challenger in the near future. They could surprise them like Arsenal did, but I think they'd be more inclined, like they did with Palmer, to sell to somebody like Chelsea.
I would rather they just sell him to like PSG or
of course,
get him out of the league. Just get him out of the league.
Of course.
You know what I mean? Guys, we got 140 of you guys in the chat. Do me a favor, please do hit that like button. I got a question here. I don't know if let me just read it. Egal, I'm neither a fan of Lee or AFTV. Please ask Tom. Supposedly next season we will fail to win the league by 1 point and get a UCL quarterfinals. Will Tom beat Arteta out then? I would.
So the question is, if we don't win anything next season, do you therefore want Arteta out? I said at the start of the show that Arteta has earned that next contract. That next contract that will, in my opinion, I estimate to run till 2027, maybe longer. He has to deliver a Premier League title or a UCL title in that contract. And we cannot go backwards, is the other point to make as well.
No regression.
Arsenal cannot regress. And if Arsenal start to regress, and you can pinpoint it being Arteta as the reason as to why we're regressing, and there's not some ridiculous kind of injury hellscape where everyone's unavailable, so it was obvious Arsenal were going to go backwards. You cannot afford to go backwards in this project, because all Arsenal have done under Arteta is move in a forward direction. They've only gone into a more competitive space. We've only moved into a space where Arsenal are more likely to win the biggest and best titles out there. So we can't go backwards. If we don't win anything next season, it'll be interesting to see what's happened to lead us to that point, like why we didn't win the FA Cup, why we didn't win the League Cup, why we didn't win the title, how far we went in the Champions League. At the end of the day, Arteta will be culpable during his next contract if indeed he can't take us to that stage. Because at the end of the day, no single person is ever going to be bigger than Arsenal Football Club, and you have to make the decisions that are in the benefit to the club. But, there's always this obsession with being either Arteta in or Arteta out. I'm just Arsenal. I just enjoy being an Arsenal fan and enjoying seeing where we're going. As long as we're moving in the right direction, I'm very happy indeed.
Me too. I fully agree there. By the way, everyone in the chat, do me a favor, please do hit that like button right now. Chelsea, United, Arsenal are all waiting on Benjamin Sesko's decisions in the next few days, coming from Fabrizio Romano. I've heard this exact same quote 7 times now this week. Yeah. We already know Chelsea and Manchester United are interested, and Arsenal are interested. It's just who's going to pull the trigger. The player said, okay, apparently he's happy if he was to join Arsenal. Do you think Sesko is something that gets done, or do you think at this moment in time it's just the transfer window? It's early, a lot of smoke screens. You never know.
I think there's more noise than there is reality to this one.
Really?
Arsenal are interested. He's certainly on their, he's certainly one of the considerations for the centre forward position. But I think there's a lot of, I think this is obviously and as happens in the transfer window, he is really the only name right now that we can latch on to, talk about for Arsenal being a really realistic signing. But the reality is, of course, that he's not made a decision yet. There is a buyout clause in his contract. You have to ask the questions why that hasn't been activated yet. The only answer we've really got is that he's not made his mind up about where he wants to go. I'm just not as convinced that it's a case of if he picks Arsenal, he's going to go Arsenal. I believe that Arsenal are the most likely candidate at this stage, but I think that it's every day we talk more about Sesko, so the deal gets blown bigger and bigger and bigger. When I don't think much has changed over the past week or so. When in reality, I think that's the reality. I don't think much has changed in the last week regarding Sesko.
Nah, yeah. My thing is, I'm just worried that he's going to end up at Chelsea because maybe we're not as serious, or he gets a new deal. Worst case scenario,
not as serious in terms of like our interest in him, or like
in the sense that it's a release clause, as you said. If we really want the player and we've done all of the due diligence and everything, and we want a signing of a striker in before the beginning of preseason, then it would make sense to get this agreed before the Euros, and then we can get all the finalizations and everything done after.
Yeah. You have to also point out that obviously the release clause expires on June 30th, which puts Arsenal into.
Oh, I thought it was the 14th.
No, it's as far as I understand, unless I'm wrong about this, it's the end of the month for Sesko. He wants a decision before the Euros, but the release clause, I believe, expires at the end of this month. The issue is that when you go for a player like this, for instance, what you're doing is you're committing that spot to that player. Now we know that Sesko's availability is obviously in this month. So if Arsenal go for Sesko, they are in some ways gambling that is the best striker option that they can get during this summer. So what might be the case is that Arsenal see him as a very realistic, gettable striker right now, but maybe they're not willing to pull the trigger yet because they feel something better might be, around the corner for them. Arsenal are so strategic in how they pull off every single deal. There is always plan Bs, Cs, Ds. There's always lists of players in different positions that they like. And they will be meticulous in whether or not they pull the trigger on someone. People talk about Arsenal are taking too long to do this deal. Why can't we just sign the player? Why can't we get it done? The reason why Arsenal are where they are, which is competing for titles, is because we've been extremely astute and patient and strategic in all of the deals that we've done. Not all of them have worked out, but thankfully, as we discussed earlier, the vast majority in the investment we've made under Edu and Arteta has been hits, which has led us to the point we are. So we can all pine after Arsenal being quick in the market and getting deals done early and getting that business done. But I just want Arsenal to get the right players in. I don't care how long it takes to get them. Just make sure you get the right players. So I don't mind caution.
And I think me and you would both, if Isak was available, we would say, let's get him.
Of course. Yeah, if we could get him and it didn't impact like loads of other positions that we do need to invest in, he'd be my number one choice without a doubt. Yeah.
And mine also. But don't get me wrong, I understand why Benjamin Sesko's up there. And also, you did do an article where you deep dived into the comparisons between Sesko and Alexander Isak. And you found, surprisingly, in a lot of the key areas in which Arsenal would be looking at a striker to benefit Arsenal, statistically, you see that he might be slightly superior based on last year's stats. Am I correct?
I mean, just statistically, he's performed slightly better than Isak has. The difference is obviously Isak is playing in the Premier League. For context, he's playing for a Newcastle side that has quality, but of course, RB Leipzig you'd look at comparatively where RB Leipzig competing in the Bundesliga were compared to Newcastle finishing, outside of all European qualification places this season, thanks to Man United winning the FA Cup, of course. So that's the context. But when you look at individually, his goal rate compared to Isak is basically the same in terms of how his conversion of chances. He's got 0.92 non-penalty goals and assists per 90. And sorry, that's Isak, and Sesko is 0.94. So ever so slightly better. And then you look at kind of the finishing side of things in terms of goal per shot. Sesko's not 0.3, and Isak's got 0.22. So he's very good, Sesko, and he's showing that in his numbers.
Before we go any further, guys, do me a favor. Please do like the video right now. It's absolutely free. It helps the channel out massively. So please do that for the channel. Now, I seen something about a Ukrainian player that plays for Girona.
Tsygankov.
I'm not gonna lie to you. This is the kind of signing that potentially would be slightly underwhelming, in my opinion. I'm maybe not too familiar with the player, so that may be why it would be slightly underwhelming. But as a backup winger, do you think that's the kind of price we'd be looking at, 30 million potentially? Or do you think this is just another one of those articles where it's like you can take it with a grain of salt?
I mean, at the moment, I've heard absolutely nothing on him. So that's not to say that he isn't. It's just from my side, I've not heard anything to say that, as that report says, we're captivated. I've not heard anything on that. He's a decent player. He had a good season at Girona. Girona had a good season, of course, and finished in the Champions League qualification spots. The end of the season with, I think, 8 goals and 7 assists, I think it was. So 15 goal contributor. We're talking about him on the morning show. That's why I know. And I think it ended up on something like a goal contribution every other game, which is not too bad, to be fair. We say it'd be an underwhelming signing, but I think a lot of fans saw Trossard, for 27 million quid similarly, and then look how impressive he's been. So you can't always judge a player, so conclusively just off that. And, as we've talked about, I think Arsenal and the recruiters have earned our faith in who they go for.
110%. I agree there. They have earned a lot more of our respect. And how much do you think Arsenal will spend this summer? If that's a random question that some people don't actually discuss, because I was speaking to the boys and I was saying to them that I think we're gonna spend a decent chunk on young academy players also, in addition to signings for the first team. So I wouldn't be surprised if we seem closer to 250, maybe even, dare I say, the 300 range, if you account the academy investment also.
I'd be surprised if Arsenal broke their record for transfers this summer.
You'd be surprised?
Yeah, I would be surprised. I think the only way that we do break our record is if we sell very well. If we do sell Ramsdale, Nketiah, Tierney, Lokonga, Tavares.
What's the record, by the way? Is it 300?
It's last season, so it's 105 plus 65 plus 3 million for Raya, and then the 38 for Timber. So do your maths on that. I think it's like 215 or something. Yeah, you have to remember obviously that Raya will be coming in for 27 million pounds for this summer, so that takes up part of the budget. They want a striker, they want a midfielder, they want a defender. There's potential for a wide player. So
another goalkeeper, or could there be a
backup? If Ramsdale leaves, they're going to need one. They're going to have to get one.
Do you think Ramsdale stays?
I'd be very surprised. The only way that Ramsdale stayed was if no one came in and offered what Arsenal want for him. So he could leave on loan still if that doesn't happen. It could be he's only just signed a new deal. So Arsenal aren't under any pressure to sell. And if they send him out on loan for a season and bring in a backup, he could have a great season somewhere and then get Arsenal a lot more money in 2025. So that's not exactly a worse case scenario for Arsenal if he did leave on loan.
So you're not too particularly worried about how much we're going to spend. It's more about how we're going to spend it.
Yeah, I frankly couldn't care less how much Arsenal spend as long as they invest well and strengthen the squad. That's all that matters to me. It's not about how much we spend. It's Arsenal have got a very good record of spending 20 to 30 million on certain players and getting really good returns from that. So it's not always going to be about adding the Declan Rices of this world. And I don't necessarily think that that is available for Arsenal in this window. I don't think there is a Declan Rice type signing that there is out there. That could change later on, as I said, and that's why we might be patient. But Arsenal can strengthen this squad and close that 2-point gap by investing smartly and shrewdly, not necessarily spending massively.
Could you see a scenario where there's like 8 outgoings from the first team this window?
Oh, yeah, 100%. Yeah, you could easily see 8. I mean, we've seen 2 already in Cedric and El Neni. We could see Nketiah, you could see Zinchenko, you could see Kivior, you could see Tierney and Tavares and Lokonga, as I've mentioned. You could see Smith Rowe, Vieira, Partey. There could be loads, that I think there's upwards. I think you could get into potentially double figures, in a mad window. So it's crazy how many could leave.
Wow, I never really thought about it that way. You're right. There's so many different players that we could really sell. It's just, is there a market for all of them? That's the problem.
Yeah,
we really do. We really
with
do
profit
need
and sustainability. We don't know how much of a market there's going to be. It's unpredictable.
I don't think Arsenal have an issue with profit and sustainability, though. We're okay with that, if I'm not mistaken.
We're okay with it, yeah. But the club are very mindful of the cycles of it. They're very mindful of staying within the comfortably within if they can. They don't really want to be in a position where, one false move and then you're in a lot of hot water. So they are going to abide by them as carefully and as cautiously as they can.
What do you think about the whole Man City situation? Because I did watch your video slightly, but I wanted to ask you here before we move.
I think it's I think the legal action that they're attempting is horrible. Like, it is a case of that the Premier League can't really afford to lose this case. And if they were to, it would open up, a really worrying scenario for the Premier League, where clubs can spend unlimited amounts, not maybe unlimited, but certainly vast more amounts than they can right now. I think that the rules, they're not perfect. They could potentially be revised or refined. But, the idea that a club could inflate sponsorships so that, if they have their links to companies or their owners own other companies and those companies can then just sponsor you for ridiculous sums of money so that you can spend whatever you want. I think that's mad,
surprised that Aston Villa, Newcastle and Chelsea are the ones supporting them.
I don't know if Newcastle backed them or not. I don't know if I saw... I thought I heard someone saying Newcastle didn't back it, but I could be wrong on that.
I've seen an article stating that was one of the clubs that backed them, and I've seen articles stating that Arsenal and Manchester United were one of the clubs that did bring this forward, if I'm not mistaken, or help evidence with the Premier League. It's interesting to see.
Are they the clubs that just didn't submit evidence rather than submitting evidence? Is that what people are suggesting? Because now there was 10 to 12 clubs that submitted evidence to the Premier League, and some didn't. So are people suggesting that if they didn't submit evidence, they're sympathising or showing support, when maybe they just want to stay out of it? So
no, I actually seen an article. Let me try to find it for you.
I'm curious.
Let me find it for you right now. So the article stated, I seen it here. I mean, it's in one of my group chats. So just bear with me.
I'm seeing one from Mike Keegan on the Mail saying,
so Everton, Newcastle are all expected to back Manchester. Everton, Chelsea, Newcastle, and Aston Villa are all expected to back Manchester City. This came from the lawyer MAG.
I don't know.
I seen it from MCFC lads.
Mike Keegan's on the Mail's reported saying that Chelsea, Villa, and Newcastle all believe City have valid concerns ahead of the hearing on Monday. So, I mean, to say that they have valid concerns, that is very broad. Obviously, that there are things about the profit and sustainability regulations that are, to a degree, questionable, that could be improved. So it's how you interpret it, isn't it?
Mike Keegan also said Man City is fighting Premier League over financial regulation rules. Chelsea, Aston Villa, and Newcastle support City's move.
Is that a tweet from him?
It's not a tweet from him. It's a subtweet from somebody else.
Oh, okay. I've seen his tweet says Chelsea, Villa, Newcastle have sympathy for City. So maybe it's a misquote. I'm just coming from his Twitter feed.
Okay, yeah. You know how these things are, man.
No, of course. That's why I always try and go back
into the article and they read and they take one. I see the one that you're talking about. You're talking about the Mail Sport.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's Mike's piece. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is where I'll show you right here. You can see that right there. That's where I was talking about.
Okay. So yeah, Chelsea have spoken out. It says Chelsea, Aston Villa, Newcastle support the move. Let me see if a word support is used in this article at all. So the only time the word support is used in Mike Keegan's article, it says between 10 and 12 clubs have provided information in support of the Premier League and its rules in what is viewed as a civil war. Sources say that group includes the likes of Man United, Arsenal, Fulham, Wolves, Brighton and Spurs. Some have provided witness statements while others have provided letters. So where that tweet, which is obviously highlighting a story from Mike Keegan, says that these clubs support them. In reality, when you read the article, it says that Chelsea, Villa and Newcastle all believe the champions have valid concerns, or it says that these players have sympathy. So it's the way language is used when aggregating sources and stories, which makes you realise kind of how things can get taken out of context rather quickly.
100%. Also, England just got announced. England's Euro 2024 team got announced. And do you support England? Of course.
I would. I can't say I watch their friendlies, but I'll sit down and watch the England tournament games and hope that they win. Yeah.
Are you going to be going to any? Do you travel to any of the games whenever?
I won't be. I'll be covering them from home this year. But it's in Germany this year, isn't it? Yeah. So we'll be covering it from the UK.
There you go. I was just going to ask you, did you see that they cut a bunch of guys? They cut Maddison, they cut James Trafford, they cut Curtis Jones, Harry Maguire, Jack Grealish, and Braithwaite.
And Quansah as well. Yeah.
Quansah didn't get cut. Quansah made the team, no?
I think he got cut. I'm pretty sure he did.
No. Quansah's on the team. I'm looking at it right now.
Is he?
Yeah. Let me show you, just to give you confirmation so you can see it. They cut Braithwaite and Harry Maguire. Quansah made it.
I don't see Quansah there.
He's right there.
That says, no, Quansah. Sorry, not Quansah. As in Jorrel Quansah, the Liverpool centre half.
Yeah.
Sorry, I can see where we got mixed up.
Yeah, I was like Quansah. Yeah, different names, but slightly similar sounding. But yeah, where I was gonna go with this was, who would you play in the midfield for England? Because defense, I think it picks itself. Since Harry Maguire is out, you just replace him with one of what do you call it, Dunk or
probably comes in, Stones and Guehi at the back.
Stones and Guehi.
So,
Trent, Gallagher, Kobe Mainoo. What are you saying?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think, we don't have other than Rice, we don't have another DM in the team. So I think you probably go Trent, Declan Rice, and Bellingham as your three, and then you go Kane, Saka, and then you have a choice of Foden or Gordon on the left-hand side, probably Foden, if it was me. So, I think you go with Rice as your sitter, you go with Trent as your kind of your playmaker in the midfield, and then you go with Bellingham as your forward-thinking midfielder. So, England should win the Euros, in my opinion. Are you
going with Trent?
I like Trent Alexander-Arnold a lot. I think that he offers a lot. I think the next best option to him is probably Conor Gallagher, who I also rate quite highly. So a lot of people don't. I don't really know why Chelsea would think or consider about selling him to Villa or Spurs if they want him. I'd be mad if they did that.
Chelsea just need the funds, and they don't value him.
Yeah, and it's mental what that club are doing to themselves. But yeah, unfortunately, what Chelsea are doing to themselves is what a lot of Arsenal fans would love Arsenal to do to themselves, and you've seen how that's worked out in recent times.
Sack the manager, get rid of everybody. Would you take Conor Gallagher at Arsenal? Because I was speaking to Gunnar Lee yesterday. He said he's like, that's the kind of midfielder we need to add into the squad. Somebody who can just do a little bit of everything.
Yeah, he would bring balance to a midfield with Rice, Gallagher, and Ødegaard. It wouldn't be a signing that it would be another Havertz repeat in terms of how fans would react to it, without question. So he would be one that would, if he came in, he'd have to hit the ground running, and if not, have a really good, end to the season. But I wouldn't be, because I don't think there is like a really solid midfield option this year, even though that is an area that Arsenal really are prioritising to strengthen. Gallagher would be a very interesting one to look at, but I don't think Chelsea would sell him to us.
I don't think Arsenal have been interested in him either.
There's nothing in it. No, there's nothing Arsenal-wise. No.
But going back to that, the back line, I think, picks itself. You're right. Midfield, if they go Trent or Conor Gallagher, it makes sense. Kobe Mainoo, I just don't think he's going to start. It's too soon for him. So, yeah, you're right on that. And then that's pretty much it, mate. There's nothing else really to talk about. I feel like backup goalkeeper, there's no serious strong links. Just that guy from... Is he
Justin
Turkish?
Bilo, the Feyenoord's Dutch goalkeeper. Yeah, he's been mentioned, but not heard really anything else on him.
Yeah, so it looks like we're going to make maybe 5 signings if we're lucky.
Maybe. We'll see.
We'll see. But yeah, Tom, I really do appreciate the time that you spent with me. Hopefully everyone enjoyed the video. Don't forget to check out the Gooner Talk every morning, 8 a.m. if I'm not mistaken.
Absolutely.
There you are. You can have your breakfast and cereal and watch Tom talk about Arsenal transfer news, like always. And yeah, I'll catch you on the next one. Thank you for joining me on the stream. If you ever need me on, you have my number. You can definitely ask me whatever you need, man.
Absolutely.
And have yourselves a wonderful day, guys. People are asking about Rodrigo before we go. I don't think it's gonna happen.
No, I'll be very, very surprised. Very, very surprised. I'll take him, but I'd be very surprised.
Yeah, I think Real Madrid would be crazy to sell him at this moment in time. Give it a year before you start making major changes now that you've brought Mbappe in. But yeah, we're out of here, people. You guys have yourselves a wonderful day. Thank you, Tom. And please do hit the like button on the way out, guys. And don't forget to subscribe to Tom's channel, The Gooner Talk. And we're out, people. Love.